UCB Live! Hey folks, we are back from commercial break. You know, today is a very historic day for UC Merced, and I say this because our guest tonight has made history as the first queer to become UC Student Regent out of UC Merced. He graduated magna cum laude in critical race and ethnic studies, and he's now a PhD student. Please welcome Josiah Beharry.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is one of the very firsts because, as I previously mentioned before the air, you are the first UC Merced student to be nominated as the UC Student Regent designate
For the 2024/2025 school year.
And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how are you doing? How do you see yourself in this role right now? And are you getting used, to being called Regent Beharry?
I'm definitely getting used to position. It's been such a wonderful experience thus far. I mean, getting to meet so many students has been, I think, the most gratifying part of the position. Just like getting to meet students of all different backgrounds, walk of lives, and seeing what they're so passionate about. It really ignites a fire in you, which kind of reaffirms why I wanted to do this in the first place all over again. And every day I just go to meetings and I hear all these stories and all the things that students want to push and work for and see happen within their college experience. And again, it just really pushes and motivates me to come to this job every single day and sit on that board and fight for them. So it's been a really positive experience thus far. Now hit me up in a year and I'll tell you how I feel, but thus far it's been amazing.
I'm getting the signal that it's not going to go well for you. What has defined you as a, Bobcat that has, persevered through so much?
It has to do all with intersectionality. I mean, that's when I applied for this position, when I was in all my interviews, that was the thing that I think I mention the most and I bring with me throughout all my positions, through my education, through the research, the work that I do, is my identity. Because I think a lot of people like to separate the two and think that our lived experiences or our identities, our past experiences in life, both the positive and the negative, have nothing to do with your work. But if anything, it has everything to do with my work. It's the driving force of it. Being, a DACA recipient, being queer, being a person of color, being a person who comes from a low-income background. I mean, all those intersections that I've crossed within my life and that I've seen the people around me face, some of the people of in my life, my friends, my family, is really why I do the things that I do, because I see how we oftentimes become the leftovers, the forgotten, the people that the law, that the history, that our society forsakes. And I think that it's really been the reason why I wanted to do this, is to bring a voice to a lot of the times the people who are too afraid to voice their own beliefs, their own opinions, and to be in the forefront of some of these decisions, and to make sure that we are part of those decisions and making sure that we are part of the table. And so that's kind of been the crux for my whole life and my society and the world around me, and why I'm at UC Merced now, why I'm a PhD student now, why I study what I study, and everything around me. So it really is just my intersectional identities and everything I've been through in the past bringing me forward to this day, and hopefully everything that I continue to do in the future, just always being humble with it and remembering that I'm not just fighting for myself, and I don't just bring myself to any issue. I bring every single person who I represent behind me what I'm discussing or fighting for something. It's a mountain of people who maybe never had the opportunity, who are now getting it because of the positionality that I have.
One of the most surprising things about you, something that I didn't really look back at my own experiences, was that we both started around the same year, August 2019, way before this, you know, thing called a pandemic had to put us to bed more often. Did you ever think to yourself that you would do this kind of job, back when you started as a Bobcat?
God, no. Honestly, never in the 10-year plan was this ever in grad school wasn't even in the works. PhD program wasn't in the works. Going into policy or politics, as this position wasn't in the works. Again, none of this was in my plan, but I think going through the pandemic, learning from my professors, graduating, and then, having a little rough patch after graduation, and just learning about myself, about education in the process, led me here. And it was truly like a dream and an aspiration that I'm now getting to live out in this position. It really is, because just to be on this board and to be in a position, not even just on the board, but just everything that I've done thus far in the past year as part of this position and everything that spans out from it, has just been so wonderful and so gratifying. And it's reaffirmed that timing is everything, that going through certain experiences is everything, and that what's meant for you will happen in good time. And really, really, really just letting life work out in the way that it's meant to work out. Because every time that I've tried to take control of my life and been like, no, this is what I'm going to plan out for the next 5 years, it doesn't ever go that way. But I think you just really have to be open to whatever comes your way opportunity wise, and exploring it as an option. And for me, what that's looked like is planting a lot of seeds and seeing whatever blooms, and then when it does bloom, really nourishing it and putting time into it. And that's what I did with this position. I planted a seed with this and so many other things, and when this started to blossom, I'm seeing now the fruits of that come out in so many other ways, and I'm just excited to kind of see what the future will look like.
When was your first exposure to student leadership? If you could take me back to the first time that you got on hands-on experience with getting to know how the UC system works, and how do these campus policies, both internally and externally, affect the lives of students?
I will say my first touch with student leadership, I'm an ASB kid. So shout out to any ASB kids out there. I definitely started that when I was in high school. I was student body vice president, junior class vice president, all the work for all my high school experiences. And that's when I really got a touch and a taste for advocating for students and what it really meant to hold a position like that. And in high school, it's not like you're making huge changes, but you're a voice for the students in a capacity that you really get to see the inner workings of the school system, of the finances of it all. And so that's when I honestly first got a taste for what it meant to be a student leader, and kind of the education system in total. And also, even back then, I was always advocating for marginalized students. You could literally pull up the proof and evidence from our high school's newspaper, where that was the crux of what I was doing my senior year, was making sure that I was a voice for marginalized students who didn't feel like they were being heard. And so after getting that taste, I kind of went into my college experience as an ethnic studies major. Funny enough, I went in first as business. I don't know why. And then I ended up switching over to critical race.
You probably still ended up here anyway.
Yeah, hopefully. But then I switched into critical race and ethnic studies. And throughout that experience, just really learning the systematic oppression of marginalized people and how that transitions into education and our education system kind of ignited this passion in me to really want to work in a space for young adults, for education, and just be an empowering force in that, and kind of being a leader and example in that. So truly, I wanted to be a high school counselor, but that didn't end up working out career-wise or path-wise. And so I had an amazing professor who's now my committee chair. Her name is Dr. Elaine Campfield, she was my stand-up teacher, actually, my stand-up comedy teacher, which I know we'll talk about later. But she was like, Josiah, I really think that you should be a PhD student in our interdisciplinary humanities. She was like, I see your writing, I see your research, I see the work that you're doing, I see how you're critically thinking. I know that you have a passion for education and students. Just apply to the IH program. She's like, you don't have to accept it, but I'll help you, develop your ideas. I'll help you with your proposal and see kind of the areas of interest that you have for research and then go from there. And so I was like, okay, I'll, again, plant that seed, see if it blossoms or not. And so I planted the seed, applied to the IH program, Interdisciplinary Humanities here at UC Merced. And that's when, after I applied for that, I really started engaging myself with the UC system and seeing how higher education was really affecting our students of all capacities within the university. But yeah, again, it really started in high school and just kind of built on from there.
You're originally from Trinidad and Tobago. For those in the audience, who might wonder, what are the best things about Trinidad and Tobago that they should totally take advantage of. I have never seen the pavilion in the past ever been committed to having to sell, free polori or sahinas. I'm saying, what would you recommend those people who are interested in going to Trinidad and Tobago, and those who want to live that cultural experience?
Yeah, well, I would first say if the pavilion wants to immerse themselves in Trinidad and Tobago's food, they should hire my mom because she's an amazing cook and she loves being in the kitchen. So I would say start there. But no, I would say that, yeah, so I was born in Trinidad. I moved to America when I was just 3 years old. So unfortunately, I didn't get to immerse myself too much with the culture because, when you come to America, especially growing up in Ventura, I feel like I had to assimilate very fast. But lucky enough, I grew up with my parents who, grew up in Trinidad and was there for a large portion of their lives. And I will say, just even from talking to my extended family and now being immersed with my culture, that Trinidad is just such a beautiful country. I feel like a lot of people go to the Caribbean islands just for vacations or to tour, but I would say that it's so rich with culture, with food, especially, Carnival. That's where it originated, where it started in the Caribbean, like Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados, all those amazing countries around us. And go for one of those weeks and see just the amazing clothes, the food, the fashion, just being around by the ocean and just immersing yourself with just really rich people who are so full of, in my opinion, love and care for one another. I think that's something you will definitely find in all of the Caribbean islands, is that we take care of people there. I mean, we really do. We take care of one another, and we do that through food. And I'm so glad that you mentioned some of our food that we have there, polori, sahina, but we also have bacon shark is super popular in Trinidad. It's like the sandwich. That's amazing. Our country's food is called doubles, which is like this amazing paratha with chana, and so, which is garbanzo beans for anyone who doesn't know what chana is. And it's just such good food. And so my family specifically, we're Indo-Caribbean, so I'm also Indian is my ethnic background. And so just the fusion of Indian food with Caribbean food and seeing how it's so special is just really unique to the island. And so I would say that's just definitely a way that you could get connected to Trinidad, is to find your local Caribbean food market or seller and really immerse yourself in that.
Just a quick disclaimer, I am still in the process of understanding this Trinidad terminology out here. I would have to point out that if those dishes, were to be on the main menu at the pavilion, there's still one more dish that's missing out there, and that is the Beharry biscuits. I think the Beharry biscuits have not made a debut yet, mostly because, like, you know, some employee from Pillsbury just named out a freaking biscuit out of your last name, which is actually a true story, by the way. They named the first biscuit out of your last name, Beharry. They call it the Beharry biscuits, but that didn't make it on the market. And I still question that to this day.
That's so interesting. I should hit him up and be like, "Hey, this is who I am now. Do y'all want to reintroduce that?"
Let me tell you something. They'll be bankrupt before you know
it. They're gonna charge you way more than they would originally do, for a price of one biscuit. So I wish you the best of luck on that. If they ever serve Beharry biscuits at one of the UC Regents meetings, then totally hit us up. I personally have only tried just certain Indian dishes, but not a fusion between Indian and Trinidad, dishes all in combined. I can't wait to live that experience in 5 years later. So when I actually have a six-figure job, when I have a more stable life in the future, which let's just say, it's all in the hands of Beharry and other student regents. Many of us, were actually rooting for one of our Bobcats to be on the main stage. And I believe we have a quick picture right here. This was you sitting right there with your title.
Now, normally, this is what actors have to do when shooting The Office. And we all know that you're not in The Office. But tell us more about that moment right there when you finally found your seat and you were like, where are my Beharry biscuits? But no, what can you tell me about that moment?
I actually purposely took this photo though, and I'll say a little inside scoop up to why I took this photo, because originally I was going to take it somewhere where I was sitting, but this was after the meeting had concluded, and I was talking to the person who was taking the photo, and I was like, no, I want to sit there specifically. And the reason I did that is because I was like, the representation of what this photo means to myself and to everybody looking at this is so powerful, because you have this person who in a lot of ways represents what the American dream is supposed to look like, sitting in front of the three flags, the American flag, the California flag, and the university flag. And to me, education has always been the great equalizer, the reason why everybody can achieve the American dream. I mean, it's the reason why my parents came to America, and a lot of immigrants come to America, right, to achieve a better education, better opportunity. And so when I sat in front of those three flags, I was like, I want to represent what it means to pursue your dreams, what it means to persist in the face of adversity, and what it means to really challenge and push yourself to soar and to dream big, because I wouldn't be sitting and having that title of Regent Designate in front of my name if I didn't dream big, and if I listened to all of the people who told me to dream smaller because my ambitions weren't possible. And so I purposely wanted that photo because I wanted my kids in the future, I wanted people in the future to realize that the immigrant dream and the possibilities are still alive, and that they too can really be exceptional and be everything that they want to be with the right amount of work. And even without the right amount of work, they can really come to this country and be everything that they want to pursue and that they dream to be.
I have never been to this room, but my colleagues from UCSA who have been to this room before, they actually thought that the third flag was from Sweden. And so at that point on, I had to make a reasonable assumption. There was a big ass conflict of interest, right around this room. And so we had to do something about it before either the FBI or the CIA, crashes into the room and ruins your nomination. You know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that this not happened. This is definitely, I think the best highlight that would probably be scripted in one of UC Merced's history books. Speaking from my own experience, serving at ACCM 2-3 years ago, I have never saw myself get to that point like ever yet. And funny enough, I have thought about it, but here was the catch. I was 20, and I and I think I was more concentrated on trying to fix my youth first before I get into my real adulthood, which is something you rarely hear from a 22-year-old. But here you are, with other talented leaders. As you can see here, this is, UCSA president Alex. And of course, we had another student regent here. Now, did you decide to take this picture also?
No, that was just a great picture too, to represent like all different campuses. I mean, Merhawi, he's the new student regent right now. He comes from UCLA. I come from UC Merced. Alex, I believe, came from UCSB, and then
Yep.
Ryan. And so that's just a great photo to represent, like, this is what our system should look like. It should be a representation of people from 4 different schools, from different regions, from different lived experiences, all coming to table to bring their own voice and their own unique identity and background to the conversations that need to happen. And I think more importantly, I want to emphasize regionally, this is so important. I mean, we've talked about multiple times in this episode that I'm the first from Merced, and Merced represents the Central Valley, an important region, not just for our state, but our whole country. Like, we provide so many resources for our whole country. So that's why it's so important to have a representation that looks like this photo right here, regionally, of 4 different experiences all coming to this board of regents to talk about what our campuses uniquely bring to the University of California, to the country, and to the world, because the UC system does make its impact in the world.
So, just to narrow it down, I guess, to the $1 million question that I think these people on the background are also probably asking, why in the hell are you not governor right now? And I think that's what everyone wants to know. Would you ever see yourself become governor, or would you rather just live onto this experience first and then see like where life takes you?
I think a little bit of both. I think that I want to, develop myself a little bit. I think there's so much to learn. I mean, just even in immersing myself in this position, I'm like, wow, there's so much of the political structures and system that I myself don't even know. There's so much change that needs to happen, just even in the UC, but in California in general. I'm like, wow, this is a big programs and big backgrounds.
So what I'm hearing is Governor Newsom is in trouble right now.
No. He's not in trouble anytime soon. But if the government changes its law and I can run,
right.
Love the opportunity. I love being a public servant, which is what these people are. We are public servants. We answer to our constituents. We answer to the people who chose us, and we represent them. And so to be in a position like that would be amazing. Now, I would start smaller, like definitely in a couple of years, definitely prospect in my mind to run for city council, mayor, in that capacity, and kind of grow the county and the community out here in Merced. And then, postulate the idea of potentially being, a state legislator in that capacity. So yeah, it is in the back of my mind. Thank you for asking. This could be my first little campaign outreach.
But this is not a 24-hour thing, just so you know, because you're just starting this shit. So I'm telling you right now, these people will be more than happy to donate you billions of dollars out of UC Regent's budget. I'm more than happy to share with you that. But just very quickly,
do you know what President Drake does when he's off camera?
No. I don't know any.
Because I believe you're in that room, so I just thought I would like legitimately ask, what I'm saying, just for the sake of, violating the NDAs.
No. But I will say, I think that oftentimes people on the board get a misconception of being, these money hungry, like really mean people, but they honestly, and I truly say this, I wouldn't have said this if I didn't believe it. They really do care about the interest of our students, and we have to recognize that they're part of a machine that's so much greater than any of us on that board, and we have a responsibility for that machine in order to run it and make sure that it's effectively supporting everyone. Now, that's not to say that machine can't be more well oiled and there isn't things that can be done to fix it, but I will say that he really and they all really care about our students deeply and passionately, and most of them. And so I think that he, from what I've noticed, is a really respectable man with great integrity thus far. And so I just look forward to working with him more. And thus far, he's been really receptive towards Marhawi as a student regent, who's been an amazing mentor and leader to me. And so I look forward to seeing, that same reciprocity to myself when I hold the title.
We have seen how, let's just dive into one of the top issues that you've worked on, and that is student housing. The UC system was trying to keep a stable or decent record, on its commitment, to providing more student housing, on all UC campuses. In the past 2 years alone, we have seen a surge, in many cases related to the student housing crisis. We have never seen the student housing crisis evolve this far as we speak, especially when Merced itself, experienced the same thing. Not to mention the Merced Station fiasco that happened like 2 years ago. From your experience in student leadership and to where you are now, like, what do you expect to see from the UC Regents in terms of student housing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say, to make people feel a little bit better, there is a lot of housing projects in the works. I mean, UC Merced just mentioned one of its own where they're combining its efforts with Merced College to bring a 2030 housing project that will house a couple hundred students in combination with Merced College and UC Merced. And that's a dual type of program that we're mirroring from UC Riverside, where not only will we support students, but we'll offer kind of a streamlined process to integrating community college students into just the UC system and higher ed system. And so that, for example, is just one of the projects UC Merced is working on, which helps with housing and helps with our transfer retention. But also there's so many housing projects happening with UC Berkeley. They're building housing there. UC Santa Cruz, there's talks with just so many campuses. And I think for me, this has not only been a UC issue, it's also been a county issue. I mean, just a couple days ago, I was standing in front of the city council advocating for affordable housing because we do have kids who move out into the cities around us. And so as much as we're holding the UC system and the UC Regents accountable for ensuring that we have affordable housing, we also need to be going to our city leaders and our community leaders in our counties and ensuring that they have the same amount of pressure on them to provide housing for the community around them, making sure that rent isn't being increased because of a lot of students do move out. So it's a two-for issue for me. It's holding the UC accountable, but it's also making sure that I do my best to advocate in the cities where UCs do reside in, and making sure that, one, we're taking care of our students, but we're taking care of the residents who are affected by the UCs in their community. And so that's how I see the issue going forward, is advocating my efforts both on the board, which is happening, and making sure that I'm equally and that students are equally and staff, etc., are going into the cities and doing the same amount of effort there. And so that's what I've been doing thus far.
And I mention this because keeping the costs low for low-income students, we have seen this issue reviving itself over and over again, mostly because the main obstacles, of the housing market. That's not only happening, of course, locally, but also statewide, nationwide. Um, it's almost as if we are battling with a gambling machine that only spits out lucky deals that
Mhm.
certain folks can grasp onto, but the rest remains almost like an impossible win for the majority of folks, who desperately need affordable housing at this time. Many of us have been asking ourselves if, Merced has constantly been keeping its word, on affordable housing. Grassroots have constantly been claiming that Merced has been double dipping with affordable housing, along with like other issues that are constantly overwhelming their work, in affordable housing, such as like funding for police and fire department. And for those who don't know yet, this week was one of the city council's hardcore meetings. But something that really struck me about that event was that we had the highest turnout of UC students ever. From where you started, have you seen affordable housing like improve at all in your view?
Merced has definitely been working on making sure that they're developing more, which is important because we need more houses here, because we're having an influx of people moving here, not just from the UC, but people from the Bay Area, especially. There was an article that came out a couple months ago about how Merced and places in the Central Valley are experiencing high influx of foot traffic from residents who are leaving the Bay Areas and Southern California because it's becoming so expensive. And so I've always been advocating that like Merced is eventually going to become a sanctuary for a lot of people who are escaping those high costs. So we do need the development here to make sure that as they're coming, we have the supply to meet that demand. But we have to make sure that that supply is at an affordable rate. And in my opinion, I don't see that happening in the same capacity as I would love it to happen. And I wish that we develop all of Merced, not just the regions on the north side, but also on the south side of Merced, the old side of Merced. We need to make sure that we're um, taking care of the residents here, because their rent is increasing. And south of Merced, I heard a resident talk about how, they're having problems with their water, the lighting in that area. So I think that I want to see the city doing more. I really want to see the city doing more. And that's why I was at that meeting advocating for this issue. That's why I constantly have talks with our assistant mayor, Bertha. That's why I'm planning moving forward to be at more of those city council meetings and to engage myself with the understanding of Merced County's politics and understanding what has been going on and why the development is not happening on that side, and why, if it is happening, it's not becoming affordable or meeting the needs of our community. And so it's an uphill battle, and I would truly like to see more work being done on their end.
How would you approach the UC system's resurgence of competence after the pandemic? How did you think they have went about like these challenges that they faced throughout the pandemic?
That's why voices like myself are so important on the board, to reaffirm what students are going through, to reaffirm what the faculty, the staff is going through, and to humanize some of the issues that become so lost in translation through policy, through paperwork, through statistics, humanizing it. And that's why I work in the humanities, is because we need that humanness behind it. And I would say that you mentioned my optimism, and I think we're so enthralled in a system, not only the UC system, but so many systems in the world and in our country, that we can't ever avoid, right? We have to work with them. But part of my work is how can we fix those systems with what we have to make them better and inclusive for everybody. And I do see that the UC is moving in a place where they're trying to do that more and more every single day. And they're doing so by including voices like myself and so many others that they bring into not only the Board of the Regents, but spaces on their campus, diversifying the professorate, diversifying the committees, the faculty, the staff they have, to make sure that when we're thinking about equity and we're thinking about inclusion, that we're doing so by having people in place who know the lived experiences of the policies on the other end, and who can then therefore recommend decisions going forward that take into account those real people. So I will say that their competency is getting better. I will say that the pandemic hurt everybody. I think not only hurt us in social and emotional ways, but financially. I mean, right now we see development is so expensive because of inflation, because of the war that's going on, because of just the pandemic in general and COVID and everything that residually came after that. And so we're all in the situation if we're having to now work with prices and things that we haven't had to work with before. And that's real. And that's not something that's going to be figured out in a couple of years, to be honest, because it's unprecedented. All of these things are unprecedented. I mean, as young people, we're constantly living through history every single day, right? I mean, we just went through it this week with the Speaker of the House, right? And so while we're all navigating it as Gen Z, we have to remember these institutions are having to navigate it too, right? And so they're figuring it out. And I think that lucky enough, we have some of the most educated and professional people in these positions who are trying their hardest to do so, but they need to do so even more with voices like myself who bring something to the table that maybe they're not considering. And part of my optimism when I'm talking about all these issues come from a place of there's so much cynicism in our world right now, in our politics, there's so much divide. And all of my work has been being in the middle of every single person, every single culture, every single individual, and saying, what can we do and what can I do as a voice that bridges gaps in communities? And so my optimism comes from I will take the brunt of knowing the cynicism and the realness and be a face to the optimism and to the humanity and to the faith and to the hope of the people, and making sure that they have somebody that they can trust. And that's what we're missing in our government today. Real people that we can look at and that can make us feel truly safe and not make us feel like there's another culture or there's something else to be afraid of, that we don't have control of our finances. And so that's what my work has always been about. And so I would say that we're in an upward trajectory, and I think that we'll continue to go upward with people who come into the conversation and who make incremental and small changes that will eventually lead to a university that we want to see. Because I always tell people the board eventually they're going to term out, right? And the people who are going to be in place, these government officials, they're going to all term out, right? And who's going to be part of those positions? We are, our generation. So if we start our part and do our part and do the work we need to do now, which is what you do, Jeremy, what I do, what the people around us do, we'll eventually hold those positions. And because we've started this work early on in our lives,
I don't know if I'll be governor, but at some point, I appreciate the pathway that you've laid out for me.
Communications director.
I don't think that was the position I expected to hear from the student regent, but I really appreciate that it has nothing to do with this interview. But very quickly, stand-up comedy. I think many people often think about just comedy as a career choice, but from what we really hear from comedians is that comedy is not really chosen, that it's more of a natural innuendo that certain people have when it comes to just expressing what's around them. You know what I'm saying? From the folks, who were there at the 2022 GAWS showcase. And I believe we have a short picture here that our staff has pulled out. This was you right there. You haven't aged that much. And I have to ask you, like, did your stand-up show, like, have any effect with your service as a student regent?
It really did, honestly. This stand-up comedy, this class, this moment in my life changed my life. Honestly, changed my life. If I didn't do what I did on that stage today, I promise you I wouldn't be here. And I did not age, but I did get skinnier from that photo. Lost a lot of weight since then. But no, it was just such a important moment because not only did I put myself out there, but comedy and humor has always been a part of my life. I've been through some traumatic experiences in my life, and so my way of dealing it, like you just mentioned, Jeremy, has always been humor, and it's always been making light of those situations, and that's what I did on that stage. And not only was I able to learn so much about the art of humor, but I was able to grow so much, not only as a public speaker, but as an individual, because it was so healing being on that stage and getting to make light about some of the most tragic things in my own life. And it was just such a beautiful, beautiful moment.
I definitely could not see how you were able to survive standing up for a long ass time, because this is typically the main challenge of of performers in general, and I can speak on it from my own experience a little bit. The things that I am going to cover, the things that is going to come out of my own comedy is not going to age well in my job. You know what I'm saying? As a UC Merced student, because I have pitched this myself to Chancellor Munoz, and he never replied the next day. But for those who don't know, for those who were not there, could you tell us what was your stand-up piece about?
It was definitely about being queer. It was really about being queer and my struggles with that. I grew up in a really conservatively Christian home, and so my struggles with that, my struggles with abuse, my struggles with just being an immigrant in this country and navigating that in America and in California and in Ventura in general. And so again, in the beginning of this interview, see how 360 life is? I talked about intersectionality, and that's what that piece was about. It was about bringing my work into my stand-up and making light of it, because that's what I've always done and that's what got me through. And so, and that's what we need more in this life. Like, we need to laugh a little bit more. Like, we're always so we're just, so many culture wars are happening and so many crazy people like Ron and McCarthy, and we just need a little bit of humor. Like, people just need places where they can be joyous, where they can laugh. And I know that cheesy saying, laughter is the best medicine, but there's so much healing in that. I'm actually co-authoring a book right now with some professors on joy and how we could bring joy in the classroom at Center Fit. And I'll actually be talking about this very stand-up routine and the effects afterwards, so you get to hear more about what happened thereafter. But we just need more joy in our world, and that's what I bring into this position too. That's why I told you I'm just a regular person. I really am one of the people who now sits in a position where I bring that humanness into something that oftentimes gets dehumanized because of the title and the stature behind it.
One of the big takeaways of this is that the way that you have moved the audience, this ability of blending, right, the not so good sides of the story versus the good sides of the story, has made people to rethink about how they view their own identities or how they approach things, with the identities that they embrace on. Out of curiosity, this is something that you rarely hear from typical creeps like myself. But has anyone rewarded you with some free Sahins or Polori after this piece?
No. But you know
Oh, that's
what?
sad.
The only thing that came out was I did have so many kids come up to me after. I say kids, like we're not the same age, but mentally I'm like 35 up here, y'all. I'm
Well,
only
we're still kids, to be honest. This was Josiah Beharry. He is the UC Student Regent Designate, and he's one of our very own Bobcats, out in the wild. Josiah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy. I appreciate your time.
We'll be right back with a quick commercial.
Crisis PR? Are you sure I need that?
Babe, you're 2 ratings in the toilet.
Like lower than the toilet.
We need to rehab your image.
I felt something. Movement?
My God.
We know what happened, but no one else can.
That woman. Did you see her?
Sweetheart, you're scaring me.
FX's American Horror Story, Delicate. All new next Wednesday at 10 on FX. Stream on Hulu.